G'day everyone. I reviewed an Addiesdive watch a couple of months ago, and it was alright, but it had a couple of shortcomings and wasn't really my bag. But not long after, I saw this offering on AliExpress, and I was, and still am, a sucker for vintage-looking timepieces. That, and the price was too good to pass up on. So let's have a second glance look at the Addiesdive AD2101 Business Diver, and from here I'll just call it the AD. So here's a specs list with all the details, including physical dimensions, weight with bracelet, water resistance, crystal, movement, and price. I will make a comment later about that lug-to-lug too. When you look at this watch, the first thing you'll see and think is Submariner homage, and you wouldn't be wrong. But what will strike you next is the Fotina hands, indices, and bezel markings. So straight off the bat, this will be a theme you'll either love or hate. And seeing as I said in the former of those categories, it makes me happy and willing to press on. The dial design holds no surprises. Running around the outer edge, you've got a Fotina themed chapter ring with a tiny rectangular indice to mark every minute, and in true Rolex homage style, you've got the circular loomed indices at every hour marker, save for the thick rectangular indices at 6 and 9, the inverted triangle at 12, and a cutout date window at 3 o'clock. Sitting underneath the 12 indices is the Addiesdive logo and its name printed in bold text just below that. And above the 6 indice, you have the automatic and 200 water resistance rating. The text sizing and font are both appropriate and sensible, as they're easy to read but don't take up too much real estate. Telling the time of these Mercedes hands with a lumen-filled lollipop on the second hand dancing around the dial. If I had to nitpick the hands, I'd say the hour hand could be a tiny bit shorter, but otherwise their size and appearance is fine. But when I look at the watch as a whole, the first words that spring to mind is handsome. That vintage theme has an almost timeless appearance to it, and the combination of that black and yellow gold colour makes it look aged and subdued yet elegant and eye-catching. Adding a hint of grandeur to it all is the gold plating on the hands, and the way they shimmer in the light. But most of the specifications on the AD are anything but old-fashioned. You have a ceramic lume-filled 120-click bezel, a slightly domed sapphire crystal for added scratch protection, and a Seiko NH35 automatic self-winding movement. For an AliExpress diver's watch, you start having these expectations, but at this price point, there's still a great inclusion. The watch itself also sits and wears comfortably on the wrist thanks to its dimensions. The shorter lug-to-lug makes the whole package a bit more compact and wears a bit smaller than its advertised diameter. I'd say it feels more like a 38 or 39mm watch. The height would make it difficult to wear this under a long sleeve, but part of that is due to the case back and that raised crystal, so it doesn't wear too top heavy and shift around on your wrist. I normally don't have much to say about watch cases, but I will say that the brushed appearance on the AD not only looks nice, but is very smooth to the touch as well. It gives the AD a more quality look and feel overall. The solid screw-down case back is a standard affair with the laser-etched Addiesdive logo prominent and its other specifications running around it. Nothing special, but it gets the job done. And that job is also to help give the AD its advertised 200 meters of water resistance. So in theory it can be used for diving, but given my swimming exploits don't go much beyond the dip in the waves, it can handle that task easily. My mixed feelings about the AD are rather extreme, as each element here has something great, but is also coupled with several small problems or a large significant problem. The 120-click bezel itself is something I absolutely love. It's ceramic, loomed, looks great and matches the dial's colour theme to a T. And for a roughly 100 Aussie dollar watch, it's amazing to see absolutely no backplay when adjusting it. The small problem it has is that the bezel edges are very rough and serrated feeling, so operating it isn't really a pleasure. The big problem it has is that it rotates with virtually no effort at all. I reckon even a stiff breeze can knock it forward a couple of clicks, so just be aware of this if you plan to time anything with it. Looking at the bracelet, the unsigned stamped metal clasp is very basic, but functions well enough, and it is finally nice to review a watch bracelet that uses a push-button release mechanism. The 3-hole micro adjust is adequate but not great. The use of polished metal links gives the bracelet and watch a neat, dressy, business-like appearance, but be prepared for visible scratching if you plan to roughhouse with it. They're solid end links too, but this is where I refer back to my lug-to-lug comment earlier. They are male end links and they push out that lug-to-lug measurement to almost 52mm, so if you have a smaller wrist, this might appear ungainly. But if that is a concern, you could throw in almost any alternate bracelet or strap thanks to the 20mm lug width. And if that added lug width isn't a concern, rest assured that this is a surprisingly comfortable bracelet that sits well on the wrist and doesn't nip hairs. The Fotina loom is something I definitely have mixed feelings about. On the one hand, I love the pseudo-radium appearance it emits in low light, giving it that old-timey look. But then again, Photonalume isn't renowned for its brightness or longevity, and the 80 is no exception to this. I'd say it's serviceable, where you'll still be able to read the time for up to around 40 minutes, but after that the hands fade too much to be of use. Yet despite their smaller size, the indices do last for distance. I checked both of these watches again after 5 hours and the 80's indices were still hanging on by a thread. If they just applied that level of lume to the hands as well, I'd be really happy with it. Any negatives about the watch? Yeah, I've got a few to mention. The rough serrated feel of the bezel was also inherited by the Cyan crown, and if I'm being honest, it's probably the worst crown I've ever operated in terms of comfort and ease. There's a considerable amount of winding that needs to be performed to unscrew and rescrew the crown, and having that jagged feeling crown between your fingers is uncomfortable enough. But because the bezel edge sits closer to crown, you'll also feel that rub into your finger for added irritation and obstruction. So my advice is to use your fingertips. But at least once it's unscrewed, setting the crown positions and adjusting the date and time is a simple, fuss-free affair, so there is a silver lining. The date complication and its execution looks more like an afterthought than a feature. Sure, it does its job, but the window is fairly small and checking the number requires a careful glance, even if you've got 20/20 vision. And for the price, I know it's hard to expect a matching color date wheel, but given the vintage vibes of the AD, I feel it breaks up the symmetry a bit. And so they should have just omitted it and used another lumed indice for the sake of that symmetry and keeping to the theme. The sapphire crystal could stand to use some more AR coding, as general lighting can affect its legibility. It also makes it hard to get a decent shot outside. And I'll say it before and I'll say it again, that logo on the dial is a bit too large and needs to come down in size a bit. If you watch my previous Addiesdive and Steel Dive reviews, you'll know what I'm on about. And that sums up my opinion about this AD. So would I recommend it? Well, as I said before, it depends on what your feelings are about Photina on a watch. If you really don't like it, you would have said no by now, but if you love it, like it, don't mind it or are a bit curious about it, I'd still recommend it. Sure, it's rough around the edges and has a few other shortcomings, but these are outweighed by its glowing positives, including a comfortable bracelet, great wearability, solid specs, and a very attractive vintage dial, all for a bit over $100 dues. If you currently own or have owned this AD model, I'd be interested to hear thoughts about it. But that's it for now, and thanks for watching, eh?